Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in life that tear us apart, not physically, but psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. And one of the most profound of these moments is when someone you love, someone you trusted, chooses to walk away. Worse still, when she chooses another man, rejection is one of the most brutal experiences a person can go through. It strikes at the very core of who we believe we are. Especially when it comes from someone you allowed into the most vulnerable chambers of your life, someone you loved, trusted, and maybe even imagined growing old with. When she walks away and chooses another man, it feels like your entire identity shatters. And in that moment, the overwhelming temptation is to believe that her leaving means you're not good enough, that you're broken, that something inside you must be fundamentally unlovable. But this is not only false, it's dangerous. You see, we are creatures of meaning. We don't just experience events, we interpret them. And the interpretation we assign to rejection can be the difference between psychological resilience and total collapse. When someone rejects you, you must resist the urge to treat that event as an objective assessment of your value. Because it's not. It's an interaction between two flawed, limited human beings, each carrying wounds, biases, fears, and unmet needs. When she leaves, it could be because of her unresolved trauma. It could be because of her craving for novelty, or attention, or security, things that have nothing to do with your worth as a man. But if you absorb the rejection and internalize it as a verdict on your identity, you hand over the pen that writes your story to someone who doesn't even want to be part of it anymore. And that is a tragic betrayal, not of her to you, but of you to yourself. Your worth cannot be granted or revoked by another human being. That's far too much power to give someone, especially someone who chose to walk away. Yet men do this all the time. They shrink after rejection, they question their masculinity, their competence, their attractiveness. They think, if I was stronger, richer, taller, more charismatic, maybe she would have stayed. And that line of thinking poisons the mind, because it replaces authentic growth with desperation for validation. You must remember this: rejection says more about the rejecter than the rejected. If someone sees you clearly, fully, and still chooses to walk away, then they were never aligned with your path in the first place. And that is a painful gift, because clarity, no matter how sharp and cutting, is always better than illusion. If she leaves you for another man, she may not have even seen you for who you are. Maybe she only saw a role you could play for her, or a fantasy that stopped serving her needs. People often project their internal voids onto others, and then blame them when those voids remain unfilled. That isn't your fault, that isn't your burden. To define yourself by rejection is to become a prisoner of someone else's incomplete understanding of you. You have to reclaim the authority to say who you are, and what you're worth. And you do that not with grand speeches or revenge fantasies, but with disciplined action. You stand up, you face yourself honestly, and you commit to the kind of growth that doesn't hinge on the approval of anyone else. Let the rejection hurt, yes, feel it, grieve it, understand it, but never let it mold you into something smaller than you are. Use it instead as a mirror. What does it reveal about your expectations, your wounds, your attachments? These are the raw materials for transformation, not condemnation. One of the most powerful moments in a man's life is when he realizes that someone's departure does not diminish him. It frees him. It opens a door he didn't even know was locked. You were not meant to beg for love. You were not created to convince someone of your value. A man's dignity is in his ability to walk away from what no longer honors him. When you are rejected, you are being redirected, either back into yourself, where healing begins, or forward into a life that's no longer chained to someone else's indecision. There's no need to become bitter, there's no honor in cynicism, but there is immense strength in knowing this. Her rejection was never about your worth, it was about her choice. And now you have a choice too, to stay stuck in the shadow of someone who left, or to walk boldly into a life built on your own terms. Letting go is one of the most misunderstood ideas in the modern psyche. People often confuse it with weakness, with giving up, with failure. They assume that if you let go of a person, a relationship, a hope, you've somehow lost. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Letting go in its most genuine form is an act of extraordinary strength. It's not an abandonment of value, it's a refusal to cling to something that no longer honors who you are becoming. When a woman chooses another man, the first instinct for many is to fight, to chase, to convince, to beg for another chance. That reaction is not surprising. It comes from a place of emotional chaos, where the mind scrambles to restore what it perceives as stability. You think, if I just say the right thing, do the right thing, maybe she'll see what she's throwing away. But here's the truth, any love that must be begged for is already dead. And when you refuse to let go of someone who's already gone in spirit, what you're actually doing is giving them full control over your dignity, your peace, your identity. Letting go doesn't mean you no longer care. It means you finally care enough about yourself to stop participating in your own diminishment. It means recognizing that no matter how deeply you loved, love cannot thrive where it is not reciprocated. And when someone replaces you, or chooses someone else, it is a profound and painful indication that their path no longer runs parallel to yours. To keep holding on is to walk in circles through a forest that no longer has a way out. There's real power in standing up and saying, "This hurts, but I will not lose myself in the process." Because letting go isn't passive, it's active. It's a conscious decision to accept reality, to face the grief with eyes open, and to stop pouring your energy into someone who has already chosen a different future. That's courage, that's strength, that's power. Most people avoid this kind of confrontation with reality because it forces them to accept that control is an illusion. We can't make people stay. We can't force love to last. We can only show up with honesty, consistency, and depth. And if that's not enough for someone, the most powerful response is not to chase, but to walk away with your spine straight and your heart intact. Because what does it say about your self-respect if you're willing to remain emotionally loyal to someone who has already emotionally exited your life? If she has chosen another man, she has made a decision that must be respected, not because you agree with it, but because you respect yourself enough not to plead for scraps. Letting go is the assertion that your life is not contingent on someone else's presence, that you are whole, even in the absence of the one you thought would complete you. And here's where the paradox lies. When you let go, not out of bitterness, but out of strength, you begin to attract what's truly aligned with you. The act of letting go clears out the clutter, the illusions, the half-hopeful fantasies. It makes space for clarity, for peace, for purpose. A man who can let go of what is not meant for him is a man who is ready to carry what is meant for him. Letting go is power, because it's freedom. It's the freedom to no longer wake up every day, wondering what she's doing, who she's with, if she's thinking of you. It's the freedom to stop performing for someone else's approval. It's the freedom to stop waiting for closure that may never come. When you let go, you close the chapter not because the story was meaningless, but because dragging it out would be a betrayal of the man you're trying to become. You cannot move forward while looking backward. You cannot build a future while clutching the ghost of what could have been. Real power comes when you accept what is and still rise. You walk away not because you're over it completely, but because you've decided your healing, your self-respect, and your evolution matter more than staying stuck in someone else's indecision. Letting go is not the end of love, it's the beginning of wisdom, and wisdom, hard-earned and deeply felt, is the foundation of a life no one can take away. When a relationship ends, especially when she chooses another man, what most people mourn isn't the truth, it's the illusion. You think you're grieving her, you think you're crying because she's gone. But more often than not, what's really causing the pain is that your fantasy of the future has been shattered. You weren't just attached to her, you were attached to what she represented, a life, a plan, a comfort. And when that vanishes, it feels like a death. But it's not the death of reality, it's the death of the story you were telling yourself. And that in many ways can be far more painful. Clinging to an illusion is seductive because it shields you from the harshness of truth. It gives you a place to hide.
Maybe she'll come back.
Maybe she still loves me deep down. Maybe he's just a rebound, and her real home. These kinds of thoughts keep you emotionally paralyzed. They keep you living in a limbo space that feels familiar, but is ultimately corrosive to your development as a man. The mind will invent 1,000 reasons to justify staying emotionally attached. But every time you entertain those thoughts, you delay your healing, you postpone your strength, you avoid the necessary pain of growth. Let's be honest, illusions are comforting. The belief that someone who left might still be the one gives you a false sense of control. It keeps hope alive, but it's not real hope. It's a counterfeit, one that looks like optimism, but functions like poison, and the longer you drink it, the more detached you become from reality. Eventually, you lose the ability to even see things clearly. You become a prisoner in a story that no longer serves you. That's not love, that's addiction, and like any addiction, there's withdrawal. The first days, weeks, sometimes months are filled with longing, not necessarily for her, but for the feelings she used to trigger in you. The comfort of her voice, the way she made you feel seen, the sense that you were chosen, but these are feelings transient and unreliable. You can't build your life around them. What you can do is take stock of what was real and what was imagined. Because many times, the relationship you think you lost never actually existed, not in the way you remember it. Maybe she was emotionally distant, maybe she belittled you when you were vulnerable, maybe she gave mixed signals, or withheld affection as a way of gaining control. But in your mind, you gloss over these things. You paint the past with soft colors. You sanitize the hurt, because facing it would mean admitting that you were investing your soul into a foundation that was already cracking. That's hard to accept, but you must, because maturity demands that you learn to separate what is from what you wished it was. And here's the hard truth. No one is coming to rescue you from this illusion. You have to dismantle it yourself, brick by brick, memory by memory. You have to pull it apart and confront each piece, not with resentment, but with clarity. Only then can you reclaim your power. Only then can you move forward unburdened by the weight of a story that's already over. When you stop clinging to illusions, something profound happens. You begin to see the situation, not just her, but yourself with frightening honesty. You realize where you compromised your values to keep the peace. You realize where you ignored red flags just to avoid being. You realize that what you were fighting for wasn't always love, but rather a temporary escape from your own insecurity. That's painful, but it's also liberating, because in that moment of clarity, you are reborn, not in some grand mystical way, but in a practical psychological sense. You begin to form an identity that is no longer tied to someone else's validation. You stop living in a mental echo chamber of what could have been, and start anchoring yourself in what is. And what is what remains after the illusion is gone, is a man standing alone, but not broken, a man capable of building something real. Not with fantasies or false hopes, but with truth, discipline, and vision. So don't cling to illusions, let them burn. And when they do, you'll discover that the only thing that ever needed saving was not the relationship, but you. There's something profoundly disorienting about heartbreak, especially when the person you love chooses someone else. It doesn't just hurt, it disturbs your sense of identity. You thought you were the man she wanted. You thought you were the center of her world. You thought the life you were building together was mutual, and suddenly all of that dissolved. What remains is confusion, anger, grief, but more than anything, a haunting question: who am I now? Without her. This is where many men fall, not because they've lost her, but because they've lost themselves in a pit. That's the real tragedy. They don't just mourn the woman, they mourn the version of themselves that only existed in relation to her. And when that version dies, there's nothing left to anchor them. They feel unmoored, drifting, unsure of what they stand for, or where to go next. That's why reclaiming your identity is not just important, it's necessary for your psychological survival. You see, when you're in a relationship, especially one where you're emotionally invested, it's easy to unconsciously allow parts of your identity to merge with hers. You start changing how you speak, how you behave, what you prioritize. You compromise, sometimes in healthy ways, but often in subtle, self-eroding ways. You give more than you realize. You shrink to avoid conflict. You mold yourself into the man you think she wants. And when she leaves, all of that attention becomes exposed. You start asking, was I ever truly myself with her? Or was I just a version of myself designed to keep her close? That kind of self-reflection can be brutal, but it's also a path to liberation, because now, in the aftermath, you have a sacred opportunity. You're standing in the ashes of a former life, and for the first time in a long time, you get to ask, who do I want to be? Not for her, but for them. Reclaiming your identity starts with brutal honesty. You have to look at the relationship, not just the good moments, but the patterns. Where did you betray yourself just to be loved? What parts of your masculinity did you hide to keep the peace? What dreams did you postpone to avoid tension? These are not acquiescing. They're invitations to rediscover what you believe, what you value, and what you're capable of when no one else is writing your script. This process is uncomfortable. It forces you to confront your dependency on external validation. And let's not pretend otherwise. Many men wrap their entire self-worth around whether or not a woman chooses them. When she walks away, it feels like a judgment on her. Yeah, that's the illusion. That's the trap. Your worth does not fluctuate with someone else's attention. Your value is not contingent on whether or not she stays. That kind of thinking is emotional slavery. To reclaim your identity is to detach from that narrative completely. It's to re-establish your inner worth. It's to stand up and say, I define who I am, not my ex, not her new boyfriend, not the opinions of others, me. And this definition is not rooted in arrogance or bitterness. It's rooted in responsibility. It's grounded in the idea that your life is your responsibility, and no one else is coming to rebuild it for you. This is the time to reforge yourself, physically, mentally, spiritually. Get strong, not to get her back, because strength is good. Educate yourself, not to impress anyone, but because knowledge gives you clarity. Find purpose, not in the past, but in the forward momentum of becoming the man you were too distracted to become before. Rediscover your voice, your convictions, your direction. There is a version of you that exists beyond heartbreak. A version that doesn't need to be chosen to feel worthy. A version that doesn't beg to be understood or accepted. A version that knows his place in the world because he earned through solitude, discipline, and truth. Let her go. Let the illusion go. And in its place, resurrect yourself. Not the man she wanted, but the man you were always meant to be. When she leaves, when she chooses another man, it's tempting to think the best way to heal is to replace her, to find someone new, to fill the void, to prove to yourself and maybe to her that you've still got it, that you're not broken, that you're desirable. It's a reaction rooted in instinct, in ego, in pain, but it's a trap. Because true healing does not happen in the arms of another woman. True healing happens in the crucible of solitude. It happens in silence, in reflection, in confronting everything you were avoiding while you were with her. You see, people think heartbreak is a signal to find a new distraction. They say, get back out there, or she's not worth your tears. But what they miss, what they fail to see, is that healing isn't about finding someone who replaces her. It's about finding the parts of yourself that were missing long before she left. When you immediately jump into another relationship, you may feel temporary relief, but it's like taping over a cracked foundation. The wound remains, the insecurities remain, the patterns repeat. You'll end up dragging your pain into the next woman's world, hoping she'll fix what the last one broke. But she can't. That's not her role. And when she fails to meet your unspoken expectations, when she doesn't heal the wounds she didn't create, you'll blame her or leave her, and the cycle will continue. That's why healing is such an uncomfortable process, because it forces you to stop projecting, to stop blaming, to stop escaping into fleeting pleasures. It invites you to sit with your pain long enough to hear what it's trying to teach you. And that's hard. That's why most people avoid it. They run from one distraction to another, never stopping long enough to ask, what did this loss reveal about me? Healing begins when you realize that the woman who left wasn't the source of your wholeness. She may have awakened parts of you, love, passion, tenderness, but those qualities were always yours. They didn't come from her, they came through you. And if they came through once, they can come through again, but only if you're willing to rebuild the vessel, to become a man who doesn't depend on a relationship to validate his existence. That doesn't mean you stop wanting connection. It means you stop needing to feel worthy. There's a difference. One is rooted in strength, the other in fear. When healing becomes about replacement, you're saying, I'm only okay if someone wants me. But when healing becomes about integration, about facing the processing grief, reclaiming your sanity, you begin to say, I'm okay, even if no one chooses me right now. That's where power lives. That's where real maturity begins. Healing is also about owning your power. Maybe you ignored the signs. Maybe you gave too much, or gave too little. Maybe you were so desperate to be loved that you compromised your boundaries. That doesn't mean you deserve the pain, but it does mean you have something to learn from it. Because healing isn't just about soothing the wound, it's about making sure you don't keep cutting yourself the same way over and over again. You have to ask, what kind of man was I in that relationship? What kind of man do I want to be moving forward? These are not questions another woman can answer for you. They're questions you must answer in the quiet places of your life, in your journal, in your discipline, in your decisions. That's where healing lies. Not in another pair of eyes, but in the mirror. And the irony is, once you stop trying to replace it, once you truly face the pain and rebuild from the inside out, you'll become the kind of man who no longer needs to chase love. You'll become the kind of man who attracts love naturally, not through manipulation or desperation, but through presence and purpose. That's real healing. That's the path forward. So no, healing is not about finding someone new to numb the ache. It's about becoming someone new, someone stronger, someone wise, someone free. When a woman chooses another man, it's easy to feel like your story is ended, like the future you had in your hands just slipped away, stolen by betrayal, crushed under the weight of rejection. The pain is real, the loss is undeniable, but what you must understand, in the core of your being, is this: the future is still yours, no matter who leaves, no matter what they say or what they take with you. Your future belongs to you, and if you surrender that, you surrender that as truth. You surrender. You see, loss as a way of narrowing your vision. It traps you in a small, suffocating space where all you can see is what's missing. You start telling yourself a story. She was my only chance. That was my only shot at happiness. That was the life I wanted. But those stories are built on emotion, not truth. Because the moment someone walks away from you, the future you imagined with them gets dismissed. And that's not a punishment. That's an invitation. It's a signal to wake up, to let go of the fantasy, and face the path you still have the power to walk. The danger of heartbreak is not just emotional, it's existential. If you let it, it will convince you that your best days are behind you. It will whisper your eyes in you'll never love again, that you'll never be enough, that you'll never find meaning without her. But those are the lies of a wounded ego, not the wisdom of a healed mind. Your best days are not behind you. They haven't even arrived yet. But you have to choose them. You have to build them. You have to take radical ownership of where you go from here. And let's be clear, this won't happen by accident. The future you want won't just show up at your door. It won't fall into your lap while you're scrolling through your phone or numbing yourself with distractions. It's built deliberately, painfully, consistently, by the choices you make after the heartbreak, the early mornings you force yourself to write, the workouts you push through, even when you feel broke, the books you read while no one is watching, the goals you set, not because you feel inspired, but because you refuse to be ruled by despair, because you are not a victim, you are not a leftover, you are not defined by the fact that she chose someone else. You are defined by what you do next, and what you do next matters. It matters because you're not just healing. For yourself, you're becoming the kind of man who can stand firm when the world falls apart. The kind of man who doesn't beg to be seen, but is impossible to ignore. The kind of man who builds his life so well, so solidly, that no one has the power to take it. This is where your character is forged, not in comfort, not in validation, but in the silence that comes
abandonment. When no one is clapping, when no one is texting, when no one is telling you how strong you are, in that space you get to decide who you will become. Will you wallow? Will you stagnate? Will you wait for someone to save you? Or will you rise, slowly, painfully, deliberately, because you know that your future is not dependent on anyone else's approval? The men who survive heartbreak are not the ones who replace quickly. They're the ones who build deeply, who dig into the wreckage of their lives and start laying a new foundation, brick by brick, value by value, habit by habit, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary, because the only alternative is to stay broken, and that is not an option. The life you imagined with her is gone, but the life you're still capable of creating is greater than you can even conceive. Right now, not because it's guaranteed, but because you are still here, breathing, thinking, choosing, and as long as you are here, the future is still unwritten. It's still yours to build. So pick up the pen and start again, not with desperation, but with not with fear, but with what? Ladies and gentlemen, understand this. When she chooses another man, she's not ending your life. She's simply revealing a door you were meant to walk through alone. And behind that door is the version of you that doesn't beg, doesn't chase, and doesn't crumble. Behind that door is the man who remembers who he is without needing her to tell him. So let her go, not with bitterness, but with gratitude, because her departure is not your downfall, it's your beginning, the end of illusion, the death of dependence, and the rise of something greater. You're not broken, you're being rebuilt, stronger, sharper, wiser. And this pain you feel, it's not punishment, it's the price of transformation. Pay it, own it, let it forge you, because your future was never hers to hold. It's yours to build, brick by brick, battle by battle, day by day. And when you finally look back, you won't thank her for staying, you'll thank her for leaving, because in losing her, you found you. Now stand up, straighten your spine, and walk forward like a man who knows he never lost anything worth keeping.